In 1944, a soldier helped carry artillery shells up a mountain in Italy under heavy fire. He never dropped a single one. He was officially enlisted, given a rank, a serial number, and a paybook. He was also a Syrian brown bear who weighed close to 500 pounds. His name was Wojtek, and almost everything you are about to hear is in the historical record. You probably think you know what a soldier looks like: a helmet, a rifle, a pair of boots. But one of the most beloved members of the Polish Second Corps had none of those things. He had fur, 4 paws, and a fondness for cigarettes. This is not a fable. It is documented in unit records, in photographs held by the Imperial War Museum, and in the memoirs of the men who served beside him. So how does a wild bear end up enlisted in an army at war? To understand that, you have to understand where these soldiers came from. After the Soviet Union invaded eastern Poland in 1939, hundreds of thousands of Polish citizens were deported east, into labor camps and prisons across the Soviet interior. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the politics flipped overnight. Suddenly, the Soviets and the Western Allies were on the same side. Many of these imprisoned Poles were released to form a new army. That army, led by General Władysław Anders, became known as the Anders Army. These men marched and traveled thousands of miles out of the Soviet Union, through Persia, which we now call Iran, toward the Middle East to regroup and rearm. They were exhausted, many were sick. Most had lost their homes and did not know if their families were alive. And it was on that journey in the spring of 1942 that the story really begins. In the mountains of Persia, a group of Polish soldiers met a local boy. The boy was carrying a small orphan bear cub in a sack. His mother had been killed by hunters. The soldiers traded for the cub. The price, by most accounts, was some food and a few coins, possibly a tin of meat and a penknife. The cub was tiny, barely able to eat solid food, so the men fed him condensed milk from an old vodka bottle with a cloth tip. They named him Wojtek. In Polish, it is an old name that loosely carries the idea of a happy warrior, or one who enjoys battle. For men who had lost almost everything, this small animal became something to care for, something alive that needed them. Wojtek grew up among soldiers, and he grew up doing what soldiers did. He learned to drink. He developed a taste for beer, which the men gave him in moderation, and he would hold the bottle in both paws. He learned to eat cigarettes, and according to multiple accounts, he preferred them lit, which sounds absurd until you realize he would usually just swallow the whole thing. He wrestled with the men for fun, learned to salute when greeted, and would mimic the soldiers, raising a paw. He even learned to carry crates. He slept in tents with the troops, and on cold nights, that was no small comfort. But here is where the story runs into a problem, a bureaucratic one. By 1943, the Anders Army was being moved toward the fighting in Italy. To get there, they would travel by ship. And the British transport authorities had a firm rule: no pets, no mascots, no animals. So the Poles found a solution that is so audacious it almost sounds invented. If Wojtek could not travel as an animal, then he would not be an animal. He would be a soldier. Wojtek was officially enlisted in the Polish army. He was given the rank of private. He was assigned to the 22nd Artillery Supply Company. He was given a name, a rank, and a serial number, recorded like any other man in the unit. On paper, the bear was a soldier of the Polish Second Corps, and so, as an enlisted private, he was allowed to board the ship and sail to Italy. Stop and picture that for a moment. A war machine of millions of men, of tanks and bombers and bureaucracy, and the only way to bring a beloved bear to the front was to give him a paybook and make him a legal member of the army. That should be the strangest part. It isn't. In early 1944, the Polish Second Corps was thrown into one of the most brutal battles of the entire Italian campaign, the Battle of Monte Cassino. Monte Cassino was a mountain crowned by an ancient monastery, and the German forces holding it had turned the high ground into a fortress. Allied troops had tried to take it several times and failed, at horrific cost. In May 1944, it was the turn of the Poles. This is the part that the soldiers who were there swore happened. During the battle, ammunition had to be hauled up steep, exposed slopes to the artillery crews. Heavy wooden crates of shells carried by hand, under fire. And according to the men of the 22nd Company, Wojtek joined them. He watched the soldiers lifting crates of shells, and he began to do the same. walking upright, carrying boxes of ammunition toward the guns. Now here we have to be careful, because this is where history and legend sit close together. The accounts come from the soldiers themselves, and there is no doubt Wojtek was present with the supply company during the campaign. Whether he carried live shells at the exact height of the battle or mostly hauled crates in the supply areas is something historians treat with some caution. What is not disputed is that the men believed it, told it for the rest of their lives, and were proud enough of it to make it permanent. Because after Monte Cassino, the 22nd Artillery Supply Company changed its official emblem. The new insignia showed a bear carrying an artillery shell. That image was approved and worn. A bear holding a shell stamped onto the badge of a fighting unit. You do not put a legend on your official insignia. You put the thing your men are proudest of. So picture the aftermath. The monastery finally falls. The Polish flag is raised over the ruins of Monte Cassino, and moving among the exhausted, grieving, triumphant soldiers is an enormous bear who has spent the campaign hauling supplies, now wearing, in effect, the same uniform as the men who raised that flag. Why does a story like this survive? Why did these men, who had seen the worst of the 20th century, hold on to a bear? Here is the counterintuitive truth. Wojtek was not a gimmick. He was not a stunt. For men who had been torn from their homeland, imprisoned, starved, and scattered across continents, who in many cases would never be able to go home again, Wojtek was continuity. He was a piece of family that had survived the whole impossible journey with them. When everything else had been taken, he was still there. And the ending makes that painfully clear. When the war ended in 1945, Poland did not become free. It fell under Soviet control. For the soldiers of the Anders Army, who had fought against both the Nazis and, earlier, suffered under the Soviets, returning home was dangerous or impossible. Many were resettled in Britain, and so was their bear. Wojtek was eventually given a home at Edinburgh Zoo in Scotland in 1947. His old comrades visited him. There are accounts of veterans calling to him over the enclosure wall in Polish, and of the bear reacting to the sound of his own language, to the voices of the men he had grown up beside. Some would toss him cigarettes for old times. He lived at the zoo until 1963. Today there are statues of Wojtek. One stands in Edinburgh. Others stand in Poland and in Italy. School children learn his name. He has become, in a strange way, the most approachable doorway into one of the most heartbreaking chapters of the war. The story of a Polish army that fought its way across the world and then had no country left to return to. And that is the thing worth sitting with. We tend to remember the Second World War in numbers so vast they stop meaning anything. Tens of millions of lives, entire cities erased. The numbers are so large that the human part disappears. And then a bear walks into the story, carrying a crate of shells up a mountain, and suddenly you can see the men around him. You can see that they were young, that they were frightened, that they needed something to love. So the next time you picture a soldier with the helmet and the rifle and the boots, remember that one of them was none of those things. He had fur and 4 paws and a paybook with his name on it. And the men who fought beside him at Monte Cassino believed to the end of their lives that the bear had carried his share.